It's simplified and short, but complex enough so that they get the meaning of what you're trying to get them to learn. And I know I like the fact that one student said it's still going to be 8, which some of your kids might do in your content area, and she responded instead of ignoring him, saying, "But I don't want to know how many now. I want to know how you're going to look at them." So.
Yeah, you said it was simplified yet complex. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Sometimes when we want our students to learn something, we have all these fancy ideas that we want to incorporate, and it's too much. But you can do something quick and simple and reinforce and reinforce and reinforce, and they'll get it a lot better than if you do all your crafty ideas. So it's just rearranging numbers on a whiteboard, which is cheap.
Yeah.
But by the end of the day, I'm sure they know. They can go home and say, "We did different combinations of 8 today with no problem." You know, and then she can go back and do it again with different number sets. So.
Yeah.
I want to say that she built off like the strengths of so many of the different learners in her classroom. And in a perfect world, I want to imagine that she had this foresight to see like where these patterns were going to go. Because as a 3rd grade teacher, the first thing I thought about was multiplication and arrays. And so like some of that like linear planning, that's where I thought, and then the decomposition of the numbers leading towards division. So I'm thinking like she has that foresight. She's thinking about the right things and really positioning them to not only just succeed in the kindergarten, but like moving forward out of her class, which was really like, I don't know, brilliant.
Yeah. So you're getting into some of the purpose that is helping to build number sense, give kids exposure to the breaking them down and decomposing and composing those numbers.
Can we take a look at it outside of a couple of these? I know we have 2 positions that we're looking at.
Yeah.
When you take a look at what she did, even though we're focusing on those 2, when it goes to orienting students to one another, when she talked about conversation in the class, from the teaching and coaching perspective, she had the opportunity for students to turn to one another, which would orient students to one another and hear their academic language is another way of assessment, the fluency of what the concept is. And then number 2, her assessment of student understanding. By having them say 8, 8, 8, she's only assessing 1 out of 15. If they had like a whiteboard and they put the number 8 up there, she would have 100% check for her understanding. So she would have actually hit 4 of the principles that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you grounding it back into those core practices. And illuminating. This was one teacher's manifestation of quick images, and there were a lot of other decisions that she could have been making. You know, we don't have the opportunity to talk to her about what was behind that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You only look at the
see this narrow window, but I think what you're bringing up is she had a lot of decisions that she could have made, that she did make, and that she could have made as alternatives.
Well, and you don't know that this might have been only the 2nd day they've been quick, you know, whatever, and so maybe you'll build on that later on and do some of those other practices and later on, another day. Yeah.
One component that's really important to me, I think she began by saying, we're going to look at 8, and then she finished
Did
again
she
with
say that?
8.
Okay.
And so the students already knew, I think, right? Did she begin with 8? Am I
Well,
wrong?
they got to that, and then she affirmed, yes, we know it's 8, so what we're going to focus on is
so
how.
she
It was
didn't-
after
she
the
didn't
first
begin
image.
with
It was
the
after the first
Either
image.
way, I like it because it's got such a low entry level, and so every kid has access to think about it
Right.
somehow. And I think that really develops that positioning kids as competent. And then, you know, she built it up by the end, and that was, I mean, it's one simple problem, and
I agree
she
with
took
it,
it so far to, you know, get the critical thinking skills going, and that was really impressive to me. And then by wrapping it up against what were we looking at today, really matters, I think.
I wonder what happened to the kid who thought there was 7.
Yeah.
I really, I mean, like, did that child then, I mean, you don't know really what else happened, if she then did another check with her, or what, you know.
Right.
So,
Maybe she thought it was 8, but because she was asked so many times, she's like, well,
Right.
maybe it's not.
I'm gonna
8,
try
maybe it's
some,
7.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
She wanted to share her different creative idea.
Yeah.
That it was
I think it's what we were talking about originally about, you know, it's a shallow activity, but it's holistic. And just watching her, there's a traditional method that the students have learned, because you see them saying 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right,
And so for her to break that conceptually in such a short time shows you right off the bat that students can make that transfer.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So it's affirming. So because they might be in a pattern, looking at those students for several years, this is how you count, and now all of a sudden, this is how you think
Right.
about representation, so.
And I really appreciated the point to like making it all inclusive, because like for our EC students, like recognize patterns, and
Right.
they can see that, but then for another student who may be like a different place on the continuum, I'm not gonna assume like, with this assessment, but like he was able to come up and articulate, like, these are twos, in the second grade, like, I don't know where she is, like, in her benchmark, but, like, that is something that every student had an entry point, and then you're pushing all of your learners on this continuum.
Yeah.
So is this the TFA person that's did that?
This is not. This is actually, I think she's a resident teacher who's partnering with the University of Washington
Okay.
at an elementary school up near Seattle. And we could probably talk about this video, this 5-minute video for the next 3 hours.
Right.
And I think that's exactly the point, that there is so much richness, and she made a million choices in that video. And that's exactly what we want to get into with our teachers, is what are we doing, and like, what is that affording students? So what I'm going to do now is hand out just a really quick, it's a 1-pager essentially, on a little bit more context